We're here to idea everyone, to fire up your curiosity and connect you with the people and ideas that shape our world. Watch, listen, understand, connect, create. Let's move the human story forward together.
Hello and welcome to The Poetry of Science, a podcast which provides insight into new scientific research via the medium of poetry. I'm your host, Dr. Sam Illingworth, and each week I'll be introducing you to some of the latest scientific findings and sharing a selection of science-themed poetry. After all, we could all do with a little bit more poetry in our lives. In this episode, I'll be exploring new research which has found that tinnitus affects more than 740 million adults and is perceived as a major problem by more than 120 million people across the world. Spectral sounds vibrate in time, untouched bells that peal with rage across the supposed soundscapes of our clattered, cluttered minds. Clicking, hissing, roaring, buzzing, whistling into empty rooms, these sonic imaginings echo through headways, sharing noiseless tones with restless, unrelenting cries. United in acoustic grief, we wait in hope for when silence brings relief. This poem is inspired by recent research published in the JAMA Neurology, which has determined a global prevalence and incidence of tinnitus. Tinnitus is the sensation of hearing ringing, buzzing, hissing, chirping, whistling, or other sounds in the ears when no corresponding external sounds are present. The noise can be intermittent or continuous and can vary in loudness. It is often worse when background noise is low, so many people are most aware of it at night when trying to fall asleep in a quiet room. For most people, the condition is merely an annoyance. In severe cases, however, tinnitus can cause people to have difficulty concentrating and sleeping, and it may eventually interfere with work and personal relationships, resulting in psychological distress. Tinnitus is considered to be a symptom of an underlying condition rather than a disease itself, and to date there is no globally accepted categorization of precisely what tinnitus actually is, or why it occurs. Similarly, a lack of standardization in its assessment has previously hampered efforts to identify and collect data on the global frequency of its occurrence. In this new study, researchers carried out a systematic review and meta-analysis of over 100 scientific publications into the prevalence of tinnitus, covering research from 1972 to the present day. In analysing all these previous studies, they found that approximately 14% of all adults are likely to experience tinnitus in their lifetimes, with up to 2% experience in the severe form of it. They also found that the occurrence of tinnitus increased with age, with any tinnitus being found to be present in 10% of young adults, 14% of middle-aged adults, and 24% of older adults. The findings of this study therefore suggest that the global burden of tinnitus is large, likely similar to that of migraines and chronic pain, and that the lack of effective treatment options thereby justifies significant investment in this area. Now that you've heard the science, let me read the poem to you again. Spectral sounds vibrate in time, untouched bells that peal with rage across the supposed soundscapes of our clattered, cluttered minds. Clicking, hissing, roaring, buzzing, whistling into empty rooms, these sonic imaginings echo through headways, sharing noiseless tones with restless, unrelenting cries. United in acoustic grief, we wait in hope for when silence brings relief. In this section of the podcast, I'd like to share a poem written by another poet on a topic related to the science that has been discussed so far. In this episode, I'll be reading Tinnitus by Henry M. Seiden. Henry M. Seiden is a psychologist and psychoanalyst who lives and practices in Forest Hills, New York. He has published poetry in several journals, including Poetry, Literal Latte, Passager, Midstream, and the Journal of the American Medical Association. He's also published a chapbook called Tinnitus. His published professional papers include articles on Wallace Stevens, Ernest Hemingway, the longing for home, the use of metaphor in psychotherapy, on using poetry in psychotherapy with children, and on mindfulness, amongst other subjects. Tinnitus, by Henry M. Seiden. It's like a ringing in the ears, a whistling, a kind of whisper, a sighing, a rising sound, then falling like the ocean when you hear it in a seashell, except without the shell. It's a murmur, a kind of gnawing. It's insistent like a hunger, but receding like an echo that never quite fades to nothing. I hear it in my sleep. I hear it now. It's a voice, but there are no words. It's saying something or about to say something, but I can't say what. Maybe something someone on a Bronx street said in another language, or I said it, or my father did, or it's a voice on his tabletop Philco radio coming from another room. Or it's the sound between the words, like the static in the station break, or the sound of the crowd under and around the broadcast voices when the Yankees played the A's in Philadelphia in 1948 and there were thunderstorms between here and there. It's like a rumble from somewhere in your chest, like exhaling changing to inhaling, how the outbreath demands, the inbreath demands, the outbreath again, and the faint, successive catching in the throat that is life, succeeding life. It's like a ringing in the ears. Thank you for listening to the Poetry of Science.
Thank you very much for being with us for this episode of the ideaXme Show. ideaXme is a global platform. Our mission is to move the human story forward by sharing knowledge of the future. You can find us on all major audio networks at www.radioideaXme.com, on YouTube and Vimeo. Please subscribe.